What if our ancestors were smarter than we give them credit for? So smart, they created concrete that could heal itself, forged blades using nanotechnology, and built computers 2,000 years before the digital age. These aren't legends. They are technologies so advanced we dismiss them as impossible, relics of a primitive past, until we were forced to rebuild them ourselves and confront the truth. The Clockwork Cosmos. It surfaced in the year 1900, a mangled lump of corroded bronze pulled from a 2,000-year-old Roman shipwreck. To the sponge divers who found it off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, it was a footnote. To the first archaeologist who saw it, it was a curiosity. For decades, experts dismissed it as little more than a ruined clock, a primitive trinket whose complexity was interesting but ultimately unknowable. This was the easy explanation that kept our modern arrogance intact, cataloguing the object as a casualty of the sea destined for a dusty basement. But locked inside its calcified shell was a secret that would rewrite the history of science, a machine more complex than anything that would be built for another 1,400 years. The artifact sat in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, largely ignored. It was only when the corroded mass cracked open that an archaeologist noticed the faint outline of a gear wheel, the first piece of disturbing evidence. How could a device with precision gearing exist in an era of simple tools and brute force engineering? The initial examinations were inconclusive, and the mystery deepened into a question that for years had no answer. The solution would have to wait for our own technology to catch up to the past. In the 1970s, X-ray imaging revealed the first ghostly glimpses of its inner workings. But it was the advanced computed tomography scanners and three-dimensional modeling of the 21st century that finally unlocked its true nature and forced us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Scientists digitally peeled back the layers of corrosion, revealing a breathtaking system of at least 30 distinct bronze gears, arranged with the precision of a master watchmaker. This was no simple navigational tool. This was a portable cosmos. By turning a single knob, you could track the position of the sun and the moon, predict solar and lunar eclipses with startling accuracy, and even account for the moon's subtly shifting speed in its orbit. It mapped the movements of the 5 planets visible to the naked eye, from Mercury to Saturn. It even had a dial to track the 4-year cycle of the Pan-Hellenic Games, including the Olympics. Its existence was an anomaly, a ghost from a timeline we never knew existed. Nothing approaching its mechanical sophistication would appear again in the historical record until the great astronomical clocks of medieval Europe over a millennium later. The only way for modern scientists to fully grasp its genius was to physically rebuild it, gear for gear, based on the digital blueprints they had uncovered. The working replica proved it beyond all doubt. The ancient Greeks had not only conceived of the universe as a grand clockwork mechanism, they had built a machine to model it. The Antikythera mechanism is a humbling reminder that history is not a straight line of progress. It forces us to ask, what other peaks of forgotten brilliance are still out there, waiting to be found again? The concrete that heals itself. The Pantheon in Rome possesses the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. After nearly 2,000 years, it stands essentially flawless, a silent testament to its creators. Now, think about the modern bridges and buildings you see every day, built with our most advanced materials and reinforced with steel, already showing signs of decay in a matter of decades. For centuries, we believed we had surpassed the Romans. We looked at their structures and saw only a primitive recipe, a historical curiosity riddled with flaws. But their greatest architectural secret was hiding inside the very mistake we ridiculed. For generations, the unparalleled longevity of Roman concrete was attributed to a single special ingredient, volcanic ash, known as pozzolana. While this ash was a critical component, it was only half the story. The real puzzle, the clue we dismissed, were the tiny millimeter-sized white chunks of lime embedded throughout. Modern engineers looked at these lime clasts and confidently called them evidence of poor quality control, a sign of sloppy, primitive mixing. But this was the disturbing evidence that defied our assumptions. Why did their flawed concrete last for millennia while our perfected version crumbled? This led to an uncomfortable question. What if the flaw was actually the key to its design? A team of modern researchers decided to challenge this assumption. To prove it, they had to rebuild the past, recreating the Roman recipe using a volatile and dangerous method known as hot mixing, where reactive quicklime was added directly to the mixture. Through this process, they finally understood. The intense heat of the reaction formed the lime clasts intentionally, creating a brilliant, self-healing mechanism. When tiny cracks inevitably formed and water seeped in, it trickled down to these dormant pockets of lime. The water would activate the clasts, triggering a chemical reaction that formed new calcium carbonate crystals, which would then spread and completely fill the crack. The concrete was engineered to actively repair itself. The Romans didn't just build for the ages, they engineered a material that could contend with age itself. It proves that sometimes the most advanced technology is one that knows how to mend its own wounds. The blade with the watery pattern, legends called it a super steel. Imagine a blade you could bend 90 degrees without breaking, yet it could still slice through falling silk. This was the Damascus blade, with its signature watery pattern. When the last smiths who knew its secret died out in the 18th century, the art was lost, becoming a ghost story that modern science ridiculed as myth and romantic exaggeration. We had surpassed these ancient blacksmiths with our industrial furnaces and scientific precision, or so we thought. The mystery of Damascus steel was its union of opposites. In metallurgy, hardness and flexibility are a trade-off. A hard material is brittle, a flexible one is soft. Yet these blades possessed both. For over 200 years, the greatest minds of the industrial age, including the brilliant scientist Michael Faraday, tried and failed to reverse engineer the steel. This was the disturbing evidence. They could analyze its chemistry, but they couldn't replicate its properties. How could an ancient recipe stump the fathers of modern science? The breakthrough finally came not from a forge, but from a laboratory, using powerful scanning electron microscopes. What they found forces an uncomfortable question. How could ancient artisans pioneer a field we've only just begun to understand? The secret wasn't just a chemical mix, it was a physical structure at the nanoscale. The meticulous, repeated process of heating and hammering the woots, steel had created something incredible within the blade itself, carbon nanotubes and nanowires of a mineral called cementite. These impossibly strong microscopic structures acted as a reinforcement. The ancient smiths, through generations of trial and error, had become the world's first nanotechnologists, manipulating matter at a scale they could never see. They hadn't just created a weapon, they had perfected a material. The secret wasn't a lost ingredient, but a lost understanding of how to orchestrate a symphony at the atomic level, proving that for centuries, the sharpest edge in the world was forged with a wisdom we are only just beginning to catch up to. The unquenchable flame. Imagine you are a sailor on the Mediterranean Sea in the 8th century. An enemy ship approaches, but instead of arrows or soldiers, its bronze prow spews a roaring jet of liquid fire. It's a fire that burns on water, a fire that sticks to your skin and your ship like a shroud, creating an inferno that the sea itself cannot quench. This was Greek fire. For centuries, its existence has been treated as a semi-mythical terror, a primitive weapon of the Dark Ages, a brutal but simple incendiary. But the historical accounts provided disturbing evidence that it was anything but simple. For more than 7 centuries, this weapon was the cornerstone of the Byzantine Empire's naval supremacy, single-handedly saving Constantinople from massive sieges. Armadas twice its size broke and fled at the mere sight of it. The formula was a state secret so closely guarded that when the empire fell in 1453, the knowledge vanished completely. All that remained were fragmented accounts of its terrifying power. This raises an uncomfortable question. What if this primitive weapon was actually a complete chemical weapons system, more sophisticated than we could imagine? Without a recipe, the only way to understand this lost technology was to attempt to rebuild it from those terrifying descriptions. Modern historians and chemists have experimented with a host of ingredients known to the Byzantines: crude petroleum or naphtha to provide the fuel, pine resin to make it sticky and thick like ancient napalm, and sulfur to increase its heat and foul smoke. But the true genius was revealed when they recreated the delivery system itself, a complex bronze pump and nozzle that could project the liquid under pressure over a significant distance. Through this process of reconstruction, It was clear this was a total weapons platform. The Byzantine engineers had mastered not just incendiaries, but fluid dynamics. It remains a fiery ghost of history, a potent reminder that some secrets are so powerful they are designed to vanish with the empires they protect. The Mirror of War. In the year 212, before Christ, the mighty Roman Republic besieged Syracuse. It seemed a foregone conclusion. But the city had Archimedes. Legend says he set their ships ablaze from the shore using nothing but sunlight. For nearly 2,000 years, the tale was dismissed as a myth, a piece of folklore. The great philosopher René Descartes himself ridiculed the idea in the 17th century, declaring it an impossibility based on the laws of optics. It was a story, nothing more. But the legend persisted, becoming a piece of disturbing evidence that wouldn't die. In the 1970s, a Greek engineer arranged 70 polished mirrors and successfully set a wooden rowboat on fire from over 160 feet away. In 2005, a team of students from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology constructed a 120 square feet mosaic of mirrors. On a clear day, they aimed it at a mock-up of a Roman ship from a distance of 100 feet. After about 10 minutes, the wood burst into flame. The uncomfortable question was no longer, could it work? But what did its power truly represent? The reconstructions proved the physics behind the legend was entirely sound. The weapon was plausible. However, they also revealed its immense difficulty. It required nearly perfect weather, a relatively stationary target, and a significant amount of time to achieve ignition. As a practical, ship-sinking superweapon, its effectiveness in the chaos of battle was questionable, but its power as a psychological weapon would have been unparalleled. Imagine you are that Roman sailor, watching as the sun itself is weaponized against you, a blinding flash of light followed by the terrifying sight of your ship's hull beginning to smoke. By rebuilding the Mirror of War, we discovered that Archimedes' true genius wasn't just in creating a weapon, but in understanding that the most powerful force on the battlefield is fear. He didn't just harness the sun, he harnessed your imagination. The jigsaw puzzle of the gods. High in the Andes Mountains of Peru, the walls of the Incan fortress Sacsayhuaman are built with stones the size of houses, some weighing over 100 tons. They are fit together without a single drop of mortar, their seams so perfect you cannot slide a piece of paper between them. For decades, our modern minds ridiculed the possibility that this could be done by human hands. We invented sensational theories of alien visitors and lost super technologies because the alternative that a pre-industrial people could achieve this seemed too incredible to accept. The disturbing evidence was right there in the stones. Multi-ton, polygonal blocks, moved for miles and shaped with impossible precision, all achieved by a culture with no iron tools, no wheeled vehicles, and no written language. The uncomfortable question was this: were we underestimating aliens, or were we profoundly underestimating the Inca? To solve the puzzle, modern researchers and local stonemasons stopped theorizing and started building. They set out to reconstruct a small section of an Incan wall using only the tools and materials that would have been available at the time. Harder stones from riverbeds used as hammers, and the sheer power of organized human labor. It was a slow, grueling process of relearning a forgotten craft. Through this hands-on reconstruction, the lost technique was finally revealed. It was a masterful, meticulous process of scribing and pounding. After moving a new, roughly shaped boulder into place above an existing stone, the masons would carefully trace the complex outline of the upper stone onto the one below. Then, with incredible patience, they would slowly pound and chip away at the lower stone, constantly checking the fit until it became a perfect, seamless match. It could take months to shape a single join, but the result was an interlocking structure of immense, earthquake-proof strength. The secret of the Incan walls was not a lost technology, but a lost perspective on time and dedication. They didn't move mountains with magic, they shaped them by hand, one perfect stone at a time. The crucible steel of the Vikings. We picture Viking warriors as savage raiders, with crude iron tools, a stereotype of brute force over sophistication. So, when archaeologists unearthed blades from the 9th to 11th centuries bearing the inscription Ulfbert, made of a metal so pure it shouldn't exist for another 800 years, the discovery was largely dismissed by the scientific community as an anomaly, a fluke, or an outright forgery. The idea that Vikings possessed superior steel was simply too contrary to the established historical narrative. But metallurgical analysis provided the disturbing evidence that could not be ignored. The blades had almost no impurities and a carbon content 3 times higher than typical European steel of the era. This was industrial quality, crucible steel, forged at temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This technology was thought to exist only in the Middle East and Central Asia. This forces an uncomfortable question. How did a piece of the Industrial Revolution end up in the hands of a Viking berserker? The answer came from rebuilding the process. Modern blacksmiths, by attempting to forge their own Ulfbert replica, experienced the immense difficulty of the task, proving it was the product of a highly advanced and specialized industry far beyond the known capabilities of Dark Age Europe. The recreation ultimately solved the puzzle. The steel itself was not of Scandinavian origin. The Vikings, whom we often imagine as isolated raiders, were in fact key players in a vast global trade network. Using the great rivers of Russia, their Volga trade route connected them to the Abbasid Caliphate. They traded furs, amber, and slaves for Arab silver, and most importantly, for ingots of this precious crucible steel. Their own master smiths would then forge these high-tech blanks into the final blades. Rebuilding it taught us that their greatest weapon wasn't just a superior blade, but their unparalleled reach across the known world. They didn't just conquer with steel, they conquered with trade, bringing the technology of the future back to the shores of the past. The 2,000-year-old spark. In 1936, during an excavation near Baghdad, a small, unassuming clay pot was unearthed. Inside was a copper cylinder and an iron rod. What would you think it was? For years, the official catalogue called it a ritual vessel. The idea, first proposed by the museum's director, that it could be a battery, was met with immediate and fierce academic ridicule. The scientific consensus was clear. Electricity was a modern invention by Alessandro Volta in the year 1800. The ancient world had no knowledge of it. The theory was mocked as sensationalism, but the object itself was the disturbing evidence. It looked, for all the world, like a simple galvanic cell. The arrangement wasn't a coincidence. It was a design. This led to an uncomfortable question. What if the experts were wrong, and this simple pot could actually generate power? The only way to resolve the debate, to move beyond pure speculation, was to stop arguing and start building. Numerous researchers and hobbyists have since constructed faithful replicas of the ancient device. When these reconstructed batteries were filled with an acidic solution like vinegar or grape juice, they worked. Every single time. They produced a small but steady electrical current, typically between 0.5 volt and 1 volt. The reconstruction proved, unequivocally, that the artifact was capable of producing electricity. This shifted the mystery from "what is it?" to "what was it for?" With no surviving text to guide them, scientists can only theorize. Was it used for a subtle form of electroplating, gilding jewelry with a thin layer of gold or silver? Was it a medical device for pain relief, a primitive form of electrotherapy? Or perhaps for religious rituals, wired to a metal statue so that when a worshipper touched it, they would feel a tingling, otherworldly buzz, the very presence of a god? It is a silent spark from the ancient world, a humbling piece of evidence that some knowledge isn't just lost, it's waiting for the right question to be asked again. The chariot that knew the way. Ancient Chinese legends describe a marvelous imperial gift, the south-pointing chariot. Atop this ornate vehicle stood a small figure whose outstretched arm always pointed south, no matter how the chariot twisted or turned. For centuries, the tale was treated as charming folklore, a magical compass that couldn't possibly be real. Modern engineers, armed with their knowledge of complex mechanics, largely ridiculed the idea that such a device could be purely mechanical without some kind of magnetic or gyroscopic aid, technologies the ancients did not possess. But the detailed historical texts provided disturbing evidence. They were clear and consistent. The device was not magnetic. It remembered south. The The technology was so sophisticated that the plans were repeatedly lost, forcing new dynasties to reverse engineer a legend. This poses an uncomfortable question: what mechanical secrets did they know that we have forgotten? The only way to truly solve the mystery was to build one. Based on those ancient texts, modern engineers began the painstaking process of reconstructing the device, gear by gear. The working replicas they created finally revealed the secret that had been lost for millennia. At the heart of the chariot was a complex system of interlocking gears that functioned as the world's first known differential. When the vehicle traveled in a straight line, the wheels spun at the same rate. But the moment the chariot began to turn, the outer wheel would travel a greater distance and thus spin faster than the inner wheel. The gears translated this difference in rotation into a counter-rotation of the figure on top, perfectly cancelling out the turn. This discovery was staggering. The differential gear is a cornerstone of modern automotive engineering. To find it, fully realized, in a 3rd century invention, was to find a piece of the modern world in the distant past. Rebuilding it didn't just solve a historical curiosity, it remapped our understanding of technological history itself, proving that the path to the present is littered with brilliant inventions that were not just ahead of their time, but completely out of it. The blueprints of the desert, etched across hundreds of square miles of barren desert in southern Peru, are drawings so vast they can only be truly recognized from high in the sky. For decades, our modern minds ridiculed the possibility that a primitive culture could achieve this. We invented sensational theories of alien visitors and hot air balloons, dismissing the Nazca people's own ingenuity because we refused to believe they could be that advanced. We preferred a fantasy to a humbling truth. The disturbing evidence was in the perfection of the lines themselves, running straight for miles over uneven terrain, forming complex animal shapes hundreds of feet long. The uncomfortable question wasn't how aliens could do this, but how had the Nazca people managed it with such precision? The solution began when researchers stopped looking to the sky and started working on the ground. The physical construction of the lines was simple, removing dark, reddish-brown pebbles to reveal the lighter soil underneath. But the accuracy was the puzzle. To solve it, they had to rebuild the process, replicating a massive figure using only wooden stakes and long cords of string. The experiment was a complete success. By creating a small master plan and scaling it up with the principles of basic geometry, they were able to create a massive, accurate image without ever needing an aerial view. Their lost technology was intellectual. They were master surveyors and practical mathematicians. The Nazca lines teach us that the most sophisticated technology is not always a complex machine. Sometimes, it is a brilliant idea. The people of the desert didn't need to fly to create their masterpieces because they had already mastered the earth beneath their feet. So, we've seen self-healing concrete, celestial computers, and steel forged at the atomic level. These discoveries do more than just rewrite our history books. They rewrite our understanding of progress itself. It forces us to confront a humbling reality, that for centuries, we may have been living among the ruins of a forgotten future. And it makes us ask the most important question of all: what other secrets are still out there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to be clever enough to look again?